Welcome to the Amplify Speakers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sund, and today's guest is Jerrid Sebesta, a high-performance keynote speaker, transformation coach, and the Amazon best-selling author of Life Undeferred. After spending 12 years as an award-winning TV meteorologist and nearly a decade helping scale businesses and develop high-performing teams, Jerrid now helps organizations unlock greater leadership, accountability, resilience, and performance. His work focuses on what he calls the internal game of success, helping people lead themselves before they lead others. Jerrid, welcome to the Amplify Speakers podcast.
I love it. I'm excited to chat today.
Absolutely. Well, I think the part I really want to dive in first is you have an extremely great career as a meteorologist. How did that shift go from meteorology to what you're doing today?
It's what everybody wants to start with, the weather. I don't know how many TV weathermen you have on this podcast, but I'm probably the first. Might be the last, depending on how this goes. I'm just an old science kid. I grew up in a trailer home in southwest Minnesota, so every time the wind blew, I always thought I was going to die. So I had this very respect for weather, fascination with it. I still do at 40, almost 48 years old. So I didn't know that was going to translate into doing television, and realized that my skill set in my low 20s was really, those are soft skills, not hard skills, talking, obviously, for a living. And so that's kind of what was a natural, was kind of the natural pathway, so to speak. But yeah, I worked at 3 stations. I worked at 3 markets, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Phoenix, Arizona, ended up in my home state in Minneapolis, Minnesota, worked for the quintessential legendary station. It's called KARE 11, and essentially walked away from that career cold turkey back in 2014. But that's another story. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a great career. Got to do things that I never thought I'd have a chance to do. Had a chance to meet celebrities, meet bands, throw out the first pitch at a Twins game, played with Harlem Globetrotters one year at Target Center in Minneapolis. And so it was really, really cool. But the question I get is, why did you leave? Especially when my stock prices were the highest at that time. And if I can look back, I really didn't know how to articulate it. But definitely, I felt like I was being called to something different. I never would have guessed that would have been a 10-year plus career in the financial world, which has now led to what I do now. But that was all part of the process of grooming and honing into what I believe is my most powerful work today, which is a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into it. Before I do, I have to ask this. As a meteorologist, you're on TV. Sometimes it's recorded ahead. Sometimes it's not. But that's a lot more intimidating than maybe even getting on the stage sometimes, knowing it's being broadcast everywhere. Was there ever something that you said that you'd have done anything to be delete that tape? I really beefed that one up.
There was one particular time, and I'm old. I've been around a long time. So, I mean, I got into TV shortly after the internet, so there's not a lot of video documentation of some of my bloopers. But yeah, oh man, especially early on in those, those early years, 2002, 2003, some pretty major malfunctions. There was one time I just completely derailed, and I think I just kind of stumbled through about 30 seconds of ahs and ums, and I think the producers knew that I had derailed because I had the deer in headlights look and obviously couldn't figure out where I wanted to go. And so they just cut to commercial. They just went to black, which is probably not ideal and what you want. But I mean, you're ad-libbing. A lot of it's live. It's you and a camera. You're carrying on a conversation, with nobody, with literally a lens of a camera. So it's a little strange, but honestly, it's not as hard as what you think it would be. But again, it kind of prepared me for the stage in a lot of ways. Listen, anybody can talk about weather for 3 minutes. It's not that hard. It really is not that hard. Where the rubber meets the road is when, what is hitting the fan, and there's tornadoes on the ground, and you're blowing out, hours of television, live, and you have to carry a conversation with a camera, with a highly fluid situation, and there's people talking in your ear, and you're looking at radars, and you're trying to control a computer. That was where the rubber met the road. Also, too, when I was at Care 11 in Minneapolis, we did a thing called the Minnesota State Fair. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Minnesota State Fair, but it is the best state fair in the country. But all the news stations would go live from the Minnesota State Fair. And we had a little barn. They called it the Care 11 barn. And we would do all of our shows from the state fair, the 12 days of the state fair. Now, that was another place that really groomed me for stage, because you never knew what you were going to get. They would give you 5 minutes. You had to talk to this person. You had to interview people in the crowd. You then had to interview the butter queen. No kidding, that's a real thing, the butter queen. And then you had to go do a forecast, which you can't see your maps. So you're literally just kind of talking blind over maps. And meanwhile, again, there's people walking around. People are yelling, screaming. There's people talking in your ear. So again, that is where the rubber met the road. Is what kind of groomed me, for doing some of the things that I do on stage now. And by the way, when there's something that just kind of comes out of nowhere, there's a glitch in the IT, something happens, even with somebody in the crowd. Maybe somebody says something. Maybe something happens in the crowd. I've been doing TV for 20 years, right? So it's like you're kind of ready for those types of things. You know what I mean? So it was all part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's some excellent grooming for what you're doing right now.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot of pressure, to say the least. A lot of moving parts. So,
Yeah.
Today somebody can practice, go up, and while there's, could be some, like you said, audience interaction that could throw you off, for the most part, nothing compared to probably what you were doing and being like, we're rolling, and we'll tell you when to stop.
Sometimes you almost want those things to happen. Like when you're green, you don't want anything outside of the ordinary. By the time you've been doing this for a couple of decades, you kind of want that. You want like the crazy comment. You want that moment, because a lot of people remember those moments more than a story that you told or like a point you were trying to make, but they'll remember that moment when somebody said something. You asked a question to somebody in the crowd and they said something audacious, and it catches you off guard. There was one time I was speaking out in California, and like mid-story, here comes like a drone, like right in front of me. And there was no way that I couldn't address it, because it was really loud. Those drones are actually really loud. And it went like right in front of the crowd, between me and the crowd. And I just stopped, and I was like, what the heck is going on here in California? And then it came around again. And instead of trying to like plow through the story, I just said, hey, everybody wave, and it was funny. It was funny. It tripped me up a little bit. It took me out of the rhythm. But again, by the time I've gotten to this point, I've had so many reps on stage in front of cameras. You kind of want those things to happen,
Yeah, it's nice to break it up from doing kind of the same routine over and over again, to have something like that.
For sure.
So let's get into, you fell and discovered your passion. Was there a moment when that happened, or did it just kind of evolve over time?
Well, somebody asked me yesterday, they're like, how did you decide that you want to be a speaker and a teacher? And I'm like, it's not really something I decided. It was more or less like data. Like I could feel my life was kind of easing me this way. I tell people, I think that your life is your greatest teacher. I think that we think that the answers are out there. I got to read a book, or I got to find this, this person with the answers. I think that we have a lot more answers than what we give ourselves credit for. We got to pay attention. And so, by the time I started getting into doing this, what I do now full time, it was pretty clear that this was my life's path, right? And so if I look at kind of like, again, the careers and where my expertise is, and even looking at my life story growing up as a child, and some of the things that I had to, I don't want to say endure, but go through. I mean, it has all kind of come to this culmination. So it's very clear that this is my life's work right now. But there was a significant point in time, and it was just over 4 years ago. It was on January the 1st, 2022. I was 43 years old. I was on a walk with my wife on New Year's Day. I live in Minnesota, so it was a cold day. And I said to my wife, I'm done. And I said it much more vehemently than that. And what I meant by that is that I was done kind of doing life this way. We were just coming out of COVID, and I don't want to go down that road, but I mean, 2020 was just a weird year as we remember. 2021 wasn't really, it wasn't as weird, but it was still pretty weird. And the writing on the wall for 2022 was that it's going to continue to be weird. And I had realized, let me rephrase that. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I had lived my life running. I was raised in a fairly dysfunctional home. My parents divorced when I was young. I was raised in a trailer home. My mom struggled fiercely with anxiety and depression. My older brother was an alcoholic. And so there was nothing but uncertainty modeled in my life. And so I really created a program of like the way that I'm going to rise above this was just to run. And in fact, I would even look at the success I had in 2 decade-plus careers, one in TV, one in the financial world. I can honestly say now, a lot of that was just a coping mechanism. It was me running and trying to stay above all of the uncertainty. And then you went into COVID, which was like the epitome. It is like the mecca of uncertainty. It was worldwide, and you literally couldn't get away. Every moment of the day, you were very aware that we were going through something global, right? And I was so tired, Chris. I was so tired. And I said to my wife on that walk, like, I am so done. And the first step was like making that decision and looking at other people who weren't doing it the way I was doing it. You know, I at the time I was on Facebook, and 99% of people were talking about the same old stuff, politics. And again, I don't want to go down that road because it was just a gross time. And that's not a political statement. It was not a fun time. But if you remember, everybody was fighting, everybody was screaming and yelling, everybody was negative. But yet there was like 1% of people that was talking about growth and expansion and opportunities, and they were actually excited about life, and I was not excited about life at the time. In fact, as I looked at my future, I don't want to sound dark, but there wasn't any. It was just like life is going to get worse from this point on. This is as good as it's going to get, and it's just going to get worse. And that's how I won't say messed up, but that's how dark my thoughts were at that time. And I said, whatever. I said to this on this walk with my wife, I said, whatever they're doing, I got to figure that out. I got to figure out whatever it is that they're doing, however it is that they're thinking, however they're operating. That's what I want to figure out. And I can trace everything back. And by the way, at the time, I was still working a W-2 job in the financial world. I didn't know that this was the path. But I could trace everything back in the last 4.5 years to that moment. And that was really the beginning of just kind of not only awakening to a different way, but then leading it into a full-time business that I get to operate, where I get paid to travel and teach people how to actually, how do you actually accomplish more, but do it with more ease, do it with more peace. Because everybody wants to go to the next level, right? Everybody wants more, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we should. But, is it crazy to say that the older we get and the more successful we get, should our peace and our ease and our happiness actually go up as well? And what I was seeing in my life is that the older I got, the more that those critical assets in my life were actually going away. Does that make sense?
It definitely makes sense.
And so the people that I'm able to help the most are the ones that are about my age. They're in their 40s, their 50s. They're successful. They're high octane. They want more. But you know what? One of the major consistent themes is that they're really tired. And then they got gurus on Instagram telling them to grind harder. Chris, I came from a time and a day and an age where 6 a.m., that was early. But pretty soon that wasn't early enough. Pretty soon it had to be 5, and now it's 4. And now you got these guys on Instagram telling you, like, you got to get up at 3 and cold plunge and peptide and red light therapy, and you got to have a 6-pack. And meanwhile, we got kids, and I got to make 100 G's a month, and I've got elderly parents, and I got to be on Instagram, and I got to be posting. And dude, we're tired. And if you're not careful, you will see your happiness start to go down, and that's an inner conflict, because high achievers want to go to the next level, but they're already at max capacity. And one of the things I tell people is it's not jamming more energy into the system. That's what I was trying to do coming out of COVID. I was trying to jam more energy into the system, and it was creating the same output. And not only that, I was getting less and less peaceful, and I was getting more and more tired and burnt out. And what I tell people now is you don't jam more energy into the system. You just increase the size of the container. You just increase the capacity to receive. And if you look at life and success from that angle, then you focus not on grinding harder, but becoming bigger. And I got to tell you, Chris, that's the first thing I noticed in 2022 when I started seeking out these people that were doing it differently. I thought that they were so smart, and they are for the most part, but they weren't geniuses. You know what? They were just different. They operated different. They had a different capacity. The way that they looked at life, business, their relationship with money was way different than mine. So it's not that they were smarter. They were just different. Their operating system, their programming that was running their life and the decisions that they made was way different than mine. And over the course of 4.5 years, I've studied this, and I'm executing this in my own life, and it's exciting. And now I actually experience more peace, more happiness, and guess what's happening to my impact? Guess what's happening to how I feel connected? Guess what's happening to my bank account, Chris? It's all going up. And meanwhile, my peace and my ease is going up as well. And so that moment that you asked me about is a long-winded answer, but that moment has kind of now come full circle here several years later to where now I'm experiencing it, and now I have the honor of teaching other people how to do it as well.
That's amazing. And as you're talking, it really reminded me of Ikigai, right? Like a real life example of when what you are good at and what your passion is, everything just starts to align really well. And you get into this state that you're just flowing at your best.
Sure.
You said over the last 4.5 years, you've learned, one of the things is how do you be bigger, play bigger, increase that capacity. What have you learned that helps somebody increase their capacity if they're sitting here listening and be like, yeah, that's me. I'm running as hard as I can. I'm tired. I don't want to keep running, but I also I know I'm capable of more, and that I'm not doing what everything I want to.
$1 million question, right? So I get it, right? But how do I do it? I think there's a number of foundational truths that I teach, and that you have to stand on. You have to understand first before we get to like the logistics, the actions. There's a foundational beliefs that we have to figure out first, and I'll just run through these really quickly. The first one is that you have to understand that everything's happening for you. You've got to actually believe that. Because if you believe that this world is slanted against you and life is to be endured, which by the way is how I believed for 40 plus years. I thought that this world was coming after me. That's why I had to constantly be moving, because if I stopped, and by the way, I didn't rest very well back then, Chris, as you could probably tell. I can rest really good now, but back then I could never stop, because if I stopped, the world's filled with uncertainty and it's going to come and get me. And it's ever chasing me. And again, it sounds weird, but that's kind of how I thought. That was my program. So you've got to understand the world is actually fighting for you. Everything is happening for you. This is not a net neutral world. It's actually slanted in your favor. Now, I'm not suggesting that there hasn't been very difficult things that you have endured and had to go through and maybe have been done to you. I'm not trivializing and downplaying any of that. But is it possible that it's all actually fighting for you? The second one is that everything is a test. Everything in this world is a test. I'm not even talking about the big things, the cataclysmic, the health scares. Yeah, of course those are tests. But the tests are in, your wife says something to you that just makes you want to run an old program. It's you getting stopped at a stoplight when you're in a hurry. It's you getting a text from that annoying in-law, or maybe that client that always bothers you, right? It's you going to the coffee shop and they spell your name wrong and it triggers something in you, or somebody cuts you off in traffic. It could be the littlest things. And when you start becoming aware, you will see that your life is constantly talking to you, and it's constantly giving you these tests. And I want to challenge people, especially listening here today, the tests are actually for you, and these are opportunities. I want you to equate tests with opportunities. Opportunities to do what? Shift something on the inside. Shift an old program. Shift an old piece of software that's actually keeping you stuck at a certain level. Remember, the answer isn't pounding more into the system, it's changing the system. And your life is giving you tests, which are opportunities to shift. Okay, does that make sense? The third one is that your life is just a reflection of whatever your programming is. Think of a movie screen. Again, I'm a little older than you, Chris, but like I remember as a kid, we didn't watch movies on flat screen TVs streaming on the internet. We watched them on a projector, right? Whatever was on that film is what projected up on the screen. I equate life to a movie. Your life is a movie getting played out in real time. It's the images flashing up on that screen in real time. Now, you can try to manipulate that screen. You can literally go up to that screen and you can talk to it and you can try to paint it, and you will not change the movie being played out on that screen. Does that make sense? How do you change the movie? You got to actually change the film, because that image is just a reflection of whatever is playing inside of that projector. Our life is the same way. So if somebody wants change, breakthrough, more revenue, you fill in the blank. You can try to jam as much energy into the system, which is like screaming at the movie screen, but instead we have to get into the internal. So your life is just a reflection of whatever your programming is. The fourth one, and this is the one that's the hardest, and it's the one where I get the most kickback. It's the easiest, but it's also the hardest to actually execute. The main reason why we are here on planet Earth is to receive. Now, that's not what you've been told. You've been told the main reason why we're here is to serve, give, leave a legacy, leave it better than the way you left it, serve other people, be happy, whatever. You fill in the blank. The main reason, if you double click and actually go one step further down into the system, our goal is to receive. Now, from that place of receivership, yes, we give and we serve. Absolutely. It's part of us. It's part of our life to give and lead and serve. Yes. But it comes from a place of receivership. Because how do you give from an empty cup? How do you give when you're not full? You know what that leads to? Burnout, dude. You're tired. You're like me at 44, 45 years old. I'm flipping tired. Well, it's because I was running with an empty cup. So the main way that you start to increase the internal program is you understand that your job here on planet Earth is to actually receive. All right? So let's hit a hard stop there. Why don't you ask a question or two, and then I can kind of get into more of like, now we can start to get in and double click on actually what do you do to actually increase that capacity? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, all three of the points were really good content. I mean, I see it in people's lives. I see it in my own life. You said it really well. Life's going to happen, and I think it takes a long time, and some people may never even figure out that we control our feelings. Right? We control how we interact. And I think sometimes people think they need approval maybe from others, or they need this feeling that they get from something. But the truth is we don't. We need air to breathe. We need food, right? We have necessities. And if you didn't have that necessity, we wouldn't be alive. But the feelings are not necessarily, we don't need them.
Right.
I'm not saying you don't feel anything. But at the end of the day, we decide when something happens to us, when we get cut off, or that conversation with our wife, we decide in that moment how we feel. And there is a way to some degree, we can control that. So I love what you're talking about, because it's some I have seen. And I think there's a big difference between, once again, those people that have figured that out and how they interact from their day to day and not. With that said, I know people that can control their feelings really well. But I don't necessarily believe that they all are walking around at their fullest capacity either. Or a lot of them are maybe can feel well, but that doesn't mean they're not tired. They're not burnt out. And so, I'm excited to kind of learn, what are you doing to fill the cup?
Yeah.
If I want to be able to give more, how am I, filling that up?
Let's talk about that. One quick compliment to what you just said. This is a hard pill for people to swallow. If you don't like the movie that's being played out on the screen of your life, if there's something that's off, guess who caused that? You did. You did, because your life is just a result of your programming. Now, that's a tough sell for a lot of people, because for years I was like, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's COVID's fault. It's the president's fault. It's the economy's fault. It's my boss's fault. It's my spouse's fault. It's my kid's fault. And our ego wants to point. And what I'm realizing now as I learn more about neurologics and like how this all functions, I actually brought that into my movie. And to your point, I can assign value to those things. I'm free to assign value. This is why two people can go through the same experience. It could be traumatic. And for one, it's their rocket fuel. It actually projects them upward and elevates them. And another one, it sends them down a spiral of addiction or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And so to your point, I get a choice. When I get cut off, I can choose. Can I be offended and be ticked off and let it ruin my day and go home and kick the dog? Or can I say, you know what an opportunity I have to not run an old script. Think of it like this. Those old programs that we have running on our system, Chris, they're like the old vinyl records. Again, you probably don't remember this, but remember the old vinyl records. Yeah. The only way that those records played is that there was a needle that was on a handle. And that handle had to physically be placed on that record. And then the record would play, right? Everybody watching and listening to this, you have got programs that are baked into your subconscious that are written on the code of your mainframe. And when you get triggered, like getting cut off in traffic or your spouse says something dumb or whatever, what is happening in a microsecond is the handle of that needle is coming off of the handle. It's coming off the arrestor, and it's playing a record. And that record is an old record that's playing the same song and dance that wants to project the same movie onto the screen. And meanwhile, you want more, and you're burnt out, and you want to make more money, and you want to have more success, and you can't because the old record keeps playing. Does that make sense? And so when we get really attuned to what's happening in our life, it is yelling and screaming at us, and it's giving us probably, if not dozens, hundreds of opportunities a day, not to run the same stupid script, so I can actually make a different choice and I can start to rewrite the programming in my own mainframe. Let's talk about the 3 things that you can do to increase your capacity. The first one is I want you to reinvigorate. I want you to reignite your desire. If you want to receive, reignite your desire. This is the intention, Chris. This isn't a revenue goal. But I challenge people, whether I work with them one-on-one, from stage, whatever, I challenge them to look into the future and see yourself at your most optimal level. Now, this is going to be difficult to do because we're not used to thinking like this. We're used to thinking logistically. I hate that word, logistics and practicality. I hate that word. For this exercise, go above the rev limiter. You know what I'm talking about, the rev limiter? Like if you ever drove motorcycles or cars, right? There was a limit as to how high the engine could rev. In your container, you know the size of your container, your cup, by the upper limit of what you believe is possible. Does that make sense? If you think that you can only make $100 a day, that is the upper level of your cup. Your desire can't handle anything above that. And so think about where you want to be and where you want to go and who are you at that level. And think about your business. Think about your career. Think about your professional life, but think about your personal life as well. And go just beyond the rev limiter, because that will force you to increase the capacity. Because if it's possible now, that means your current container can actually execute it. And I don't want that. I want you to shift the size of your container. Does that make sense? So the very first thing you have to do is you have to reignite your desire. Every single year in Q4, I do this exercise for the next upcoming year, and I think about these intentions, not just goals, but intentions for where I want to go. And they don't make sense. They're not logical, because I know the only way that I pull them into my movie is I have to become somebody bigger. Okay? So we have to reinvigorate our desire. The second piece is we need to rewire our beliefs. So if we want to receive, we have to reignite our desire, and we have to rewire our beliefs. There's 3 main buttons I push when I teach this. We have to believe in your cause, meaning what you're doing. You've got to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you're chosen, Chris. The interesting thing about that is a lot of people, a lot of high achievers, they start to struggle. If you can really get into the core of their programming, there is some sort of disbelief. They don't feel that they're worthy, and they don't believe that they are the chosen one. You are the chosen one. You know what makes you chosen? You choose it. You are here on this planet at this specific time to be living where you're living, to be doing what you're doing at this specific time in human history because you were chosen. That is your birthright. And you know what happens? When you choose it, it chooses you. That reality becomes bestowed upon you when you choose it. But you can't do that if you don't believe in yourself and you don't believe in what you're doing. So a lot of people will bottleneck this ability to receive and increase the size of their container because their belief is lacking. It's like they're causing a clog in the plumbing. You know what I'm talking about? Like the circuitry, they're short-circuiting the circuitry to receive. And the third level of belief is the hardest one. It's the one most people deal with, and it's deservantship. If you get real deep into people's programming, somewhere they feel unworthy. Somewhere, and I'm talking about like, I work with high achievers, Chris. I'm talking about like the top 1%, somewhere in their programming, they don't feel that they're worthy. A teacher said something, a coworker said something, an ex-boyfriend said something when they were in 6th grade, something that their dad said in jest when they were 8 years old, and he doesn't even remember saying it, but it caused you to create a code that got written on the hardware, and now you're creating a reality here 30, 40, 50 years later, and it's causing you to get capped in your life and you're feeling resistance, and you don't know why, and you think that trying harder is the key. And you know what the key is, Chris? You go and you delete that piece of coding, and then you watch the floodgates start to open because you have now opened the circuitry to actually receive. There's one more part, and it is the hardest one. But let's hit pause here and talk about these first two. Any comments or questions that you have on these first two pieces?
Yeah, I love the way you framed it. Without the why and the desire and the purpose, I feel like that's the gasoline for the fire, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can be moving and operating, but it's necessary. I really like, you brought up where people somewhere just don't think they're worthy, right? Like somewhere it's in there. I had that happen pretty recently, and without giving, because I just want to give clues on this person. But there's someone that I had seen spoke, and I had reached out. Now this person's resume for what they do is one of the most impressive there is. And I'm not talking about speaking. I mean, they are extremely well known. Had success at levels most people haven't in their career. Mm-hmm. And when I reached out and they looked at people I was working with and I went through it, they came back and were like, "Are you sure I'm good enough?" And I couldn't believe I got that response, because here I'm going, first of all, I'm trying to recruit you. Just to be perfectly clear here, I've seen you, so I know you are. But at the same time, if I told anyone that and they knew they'd be like, "You're kidding me, right?" Mm-hmm. There's no way with what this person has accomplished. And it just goes to show, the more people I've met, even the top people, like you said, some of the best at what they do, mm-hmm. still have to learn how to handle those thoughts of, can I do this? Am I capable of doing this?
Am I worthy? Am I worthy to receive it? Because if you don't feel that you're worthy to receive it, how is it supposed to come in? If our job is to receive, which is one of those truths we talked about a couple of minutes ago, how am I supposed to receive when I'm not giving it a space to actually land? And undeservedship will repel your ability to receive. By the way, and I mean, if that person's watching or anybody's listening to this that thinks that, get really curious about that, because chances are, if you're really vulnerable and dare to go there and have the audacity to do this, go back in the memory bank and try to figure out why that code is installed. I did this with one of my clients recently, and he's 62. He's got a successful business, but is experiencing a lot of resistance, a lot of plateaus, and he's frustrated because he knows that there's way more inside of him. And I said to him, I go, in that moment, because I spell out a situation where there's a big blessing, a big breakthrough, just like this person said to you, where it's like, I want to bring you on, and they're like, me? Am I good enough? Okay, stop right there. In that microsecond, what is causing that code to run? What's causing, what code is written on your computer system? What's the software that What's the thing that happened that caused that piece of software to get written on your mainframe? I asked my client that one time, and he's like, I'd have to think about that. I don't know, blah, 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 blah. 2 minutes later on a Zoom call, he interrupts me. He's like, Jerrid, I got it. He said, when I was young, I had a lazy eye. And it caused me, when I read, to go back to the same line, not to go down a line. And I felt really insecure about it. My teachers held me back a year, and my classmates made fun of me. He started to weep. And I said, wow. I go, how'd that make you feel? He goes, stupid, unworthy, undeserving. This is a high-level dude, Chris. And I said, when was the last time you ever thought about that? He goes, it's been decades since I thought about that. I go, do you think that experience is still causing you to reach an invisible ceiling at 62 years old, 54 years later? He said, 100%. That's how powerful this is. And he texted me later that night. He goes, I actually feel like I've been set free, because he's now going into the database, and I taught him how to hit Control-Alt-Delete, and you replace that with the truth, because the truth is he is worthy. Chris, you are worthy. I'm worthy. That's not narcissism. That's not arrogance. That's deservantship, because we're a human being, and there's infinite intrinsic value on who we are. And if we want to go to the next level as business people, entrepreneurs, fill in the blank, we have to double click on our own deservantship. And if we don't, we're short-circuiting the ability to receive and for our cup to grow. Because if we can open up that door to receive, this world's fighting for you, right? So it's going to give you little God winks, these little things that will happen that don't normally happen in that movie. Because that movie's been playing the same movie for years, right? And then something new will happen. And then, Chris, pop quiz. When the something new happens, what do you think happens to your level of belief? Goes up. And then what happens to your level of desire? Your rev limiter just increased, because you're like, if I shift something in here, that means my movie shifts. I like this. And it's a perpetual spiral upward that never ends. The only thing that dictates whether it ends is you. And then life becomes really exciting. And I got to tell you, dude, 4.5 years ago, I did not consider life exciting. It was grueling and painful. And that's been the biggest shift in me. Let's go to the third part of this framework. You've got reigniting or reigniting your desire. You've got rewiring your program. The last one is releasing. Releasing to what? Releasing to the outcome. You have to detach from outcome while you want it, while you want more, unapologetically. And by the way, unapologetically want more in life. Unapologetically want to make more money. Unapologetically want more connection. Unapologetically want more happiness and experience and peace. Unapologetically want those things. You want them and you believe it. But the third piece is you are completely detached from the outcome, meaning no matter what happens, you're good. There's a word for this that I teach and preach. It's called surrender. It's surrender. What does surrender sound like? Surrender says, I want it, but I don't need it. Surrender says, whether I gain the world or I lose everything, I'm good. Surrender says, I'm going to show up fully whole, fully alive, and whatever happens, happens, and I'm good with that. There's a posture by which you will start to emulate from, and it's wholeness. Wholeness. One thing I tell people is I say, it's not what you do, because a lot of people come to me and they're like, Jerrid, I don't know what to do. Should I go here? Should I go here? Should I quit my job? Should I start a business? Should I, And I always say, you're asking the wrong question. It's not what you do, it's where you do it from. It's the internal posture, the internal structure, the internal position of where you're doing it from. Meaning, if I'm operating from wholeness, I got to tell you, Chris, you can't make any bad decisions. And even if it doesn't go the way that you thought it would go, it will project you onto a path that you're supposed to go, because remember, this world's fighting for you. It's all slanted for you. It's choreographed. It's way more choreographed than you and I could ever fully understand. And this, if there's a hang up in your life, if there's suppression, if there's a ceiling, if you feel like there's something more inside of you and you don't know how to get it out, and you're stuck and you're fried and you're burnt out and you're tired of trying to do more, you know the key, Chris, and this is a tough one, it actually is to surrender. It might be release. I'm not suggesting do less. I'm suggesting you actually let go. And I got to tell you, for me, that was a hard one. My life for 43 plus years was I was driving, desire. It was really based out of need, lack, and scarcity. And my belief was there, but my belief was really much out of fear, and I had no surrender. I was the one that was going to figure out my life. I was the one that was going to solve my problems. And I got to tell you, up until a couple of years ago, I was capped in every single area of my life. My physical life, my financial life, my marriage, my relationship with kids. There was all a very defined ceiling that I was cranking my head up against to, and I was tired. And what has happened is that the more that I actually let go of that, I now open up the door to receive. My container increases in size. My belief goes up because my movie starts to shift. My rev limiter goes up. And if I just continue to do the work that I need to do and let the chips fall where they may. My basketball coach used to say that. You go out on the floor and he goes, you bust your butt and you let the chips fall where they may. That's surrender. That's detachment outcome. My movie will continue to shift. It will continue to change. And my ability to receive continues to go up. And so to bring this really practical, we'll start to land this plane here. To make this super practical for anybody listening, because how do you do this? The most practical thing that I can tell you to do is to start passing the tests. It's to get super aware of the tests that are showing up in your movie throughout your day and looking at them as opportunities. And don't react. Don't react, Chris. Don't react to the old stupid program that wants to keep you stuck in the movie, the Groundhog's Day movie. When you're triggered, when you can feel that needle want to come off the handle and play the old, don't let it play. Instead, respond from wholeness. Ask yourself, what would whole Jerrid here do? When you get that email, that text, when your teenage daughter or son says something snappy to you, which happens to me. I've got 2 teenagers in my house, right? And instead of reacting from the old, insecure, broken Jerrid, what would the whole Jerrid, what would he do? What would he say? Maybe he'd say nothing. Maybe he'd walk away. Maybe he'd give him a hug in an hour once the temperature goes down. Do you know what's happening? This is so powerful, Chris. I want people to hear this. When you do that, whether you understand it or not, you're rewriting the code inside of you, and you're giving yourself an opportunity to receive, and then that movie starts to shift. And guess who wins when you don't react? Guess who wins when you surrender? Guess what happens when you give up control? Guess what happens when you actually forgive? Forgiveness, by the way, is a form of surrender. You've got to give it up. Guess who wins when you do those things, Chris? You do. You do. And you experience more fulfillment, more life, more peace, more ease. And ironically, if you want to make more money and have more success, it doesn't make sense. That's actually how you get it. You open the door to actually receive it. Thoughts on that?
I love that perspective. It's really fresh. It's just different than what I've heard. And, I guess I've got a quick question, and I want to give a little more thoughts. But are you happier than you were 4.5 years ago?
I mean, 1,000%, but my happiness is because my peace is actually going up. Happiness is a byproduct of my peace, because I feel like, you remember that movie Matrix, like once Neo starts to get the downloads and he sees it, like everything starts to slow down, right? My life for 4+ decades is I was just constantly like running. I was scared of my own shadow. Any type of bad news, or the dishwasher's now leaking, and now my kid is sick, and now my car's broken, and it was just one chaotic fire to the other. And here's the deal, Chris. That stuff still happens. It still happens. Like, it's not like my life is challenge free, but I don't live in this world of like, it's my world is filled with problems and I have to solve all of them and it's all up to me. That was exhausting. I've released that. The irony is that as I've released that, I find myself not having as many emergencies. I find myself The challenges are still there, but I got to tell you, again, the result of the peace, Chris, is because I've shifted on the inside. But that's also come at a heavy cost. I mean, I got 4 kids. My oldest has dyslexia. He's a challenge. My youngest daughter has severe ADHD. She's a challenge. And even though I'm happier, more peaceful than ever, she's still a challenge. She's still a big challenge. I still have tons of challenges. But instead of running from the challenges and constantly trying to fix all the problems in my life, I'm like Neo in the Matrix, where you see the bullets coming and you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. I see what's going on here. By the way, let me just give you a quick example. I was traveling to the South Dakota 2 weeks ago to visit our niece. She was graduating high school. We leave town. And remember, everything's a test. It's all a test. Immediately, just get outside of town, I see a state trooper. Like, it's a Sunday morning. There's not much traffic, but I can definitely see a state trooper is coming. And I'm like, immediately, Chris, I'm like, I know I'm getting a ticket. I know I'm getting pulled over, and I know I'm getting a ticket. I passed him. He turned on his lights. I just immediately pulled over. I'm like, here's my money. My wife is like praying God's favor over this whole situation. I just started laughing. I go, I'm getting a ticket today. And by the way, I have a spiritual gift of getting out of tickets. I have more written warnings than anybody I know. And I'm like, I know I'm getting a ticket today. The guy got out of the car. He's like, can I have your license? 30 seconds later, wrote me a ticket, said, have a nice day, get out of here. And I can say with 100% honesty, Chris, it didn't even faze me. It didn't even trigger me even the least. There wasn't even a thought of that old program wanting to run. 2 years ago, Chris, it would have ruined my whole weekend. It would have ruined my whole weekend. I would have been ticked all weekend. I would have felt $150 poorer. I would have been ticked off at the officer. I would have kicked the dog. I don't even have a dog. I would have found a dog and I would have kicked the dog. A year ago, I wouldn't have let it ruin my weekend, but it definitely would have ruined my day. Not everybody would have known about it, but it would have bothered me. And I can tell you with 100% honesty, 2 weeks ago when I got that speeding ticket, it didn't even faze me. In fact, I started to laugh. In fact, I was actually thankful for it. I'm thankful now when the tests come, because the tests are for me. The tests are trying to shift something in me so I can increase the size of my container so I can receive something more. What would happen if we looked at our life like that? Instead of, crap, I got to deal with all this, in my life. Instead, thank goodness I've got these challenges. Thank goodness I have these conflicts. Thank goodness I have some of this friction in my life. Because this is actually the gateway. These are the golden tickets for me to receive more. And then life starts becoming really, really fun. So to your point, am I happier? I am. But it's not because my life is challenge free. Oh no. It's because I see the game differently now. And I understand the technology. And now I understand it's all happening for me. And the longer that I'm here on planet Earth, I get to take this journey and manipulate that movie as much as I possibly can, because everything is actually fighting for me. That's the biggest shift.
Yeah, I love the way you're looking at it. The happy one came up. I came across a study maybe a couple months back. It was a Harvard study, and I'm probably going to butcher the professor, but like Dr. Ben Shahar, I think, is pretty close to the name. Anyways, regardless of that, I'm sure someone looks it up and they'll probably be like, no, you're wrong. But the surprising part was the study was on happiness, and it said people find happiness in the pursuit of finding their potential. But it wasn't in the sense of, as you talked about earlier, you have to detach from the goal. And finding that potential did not mean you actually had to achieve a goal or hit something or do it. It was just in the pursuit. That when people are moving in a direction that is helping unlock a better, upgraded version of their program, basically, that's where happiness is found. I find it fascinating because it goes so much through what you were just explaining. I was actually, for some reason, when you were talking to me, I like that you said Matrix. That's what came to my mind. But I had this idea of watching Mario go on a level. In each level, it's like, all right, I've went through 40 some levels, and most of the levels all look the same from day to day. Maybe the job changed, maybe things change, but the family circumstances, the kids having this, or this happened. Anyways, it was like we keep going through there, and our Mario looks the exact same. And then we go through that, and we're like, I've seen this before. Yeah, maybe running, or I'm just gonna avoid him and jump over the guy, right? I'm not gonna fight him. But the truth is, like, you can be like, I'm gonna make myself this big, or I'm gonna pull out some I've never pulled out in the past because I'm gonna change my program, and now I'm gonna be a hero. I'm not gonna jump over that obstacle or avoid it or handle it this way or look at it differently. No, not this time. Today I'm gonna be the hero. Watch what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tackle this at every level, or I'm just gonna brush it off because my program's better. I absolutely love that the way you framed it. This whole concept is that the light bulb just kept going off throughout
Good.
this conversation.
Good. I love it,
Yeah.
brother. Yeah, man. I love sharing this. Obviously, this is the journey I've been on, and I'm honored that I get a chance to teach other people how to do it. As they say, your best client is you 3 years ago. And again, how did I feel 3-4 years ago? Tired, scared, burnt out, capped, suppressed. And what haunted me is I knew I was tapping into just a tiny fraction of what was inside of me. And I thought trying harder and finding the right guru to give me the answer was the answer. And it's not. I actually had it. I was the one blocking it. And once I started to learn to make those internal shifts and delete some of those old programs, the movie started to shift. And it makes life really, really fun and exciting. And it has changed the way I look at life, perspective, and also all the challenges that I understand they're actually happening for me. So this has been a big shift for me personally. This isn't something that I studied. It's something that I've endured and gone through and learned from. And it's fun to watch the results happen with other people when that light bulb comes on, because they immediately see something different, and then their movie starts to shift. And that's the really fun part. That's the really fun part.
Yeah, my favorite part of ever getting the opportunity to have a conversation like this is you take all your life experiences and all the chapters that you've written so far and what you've learned in that. And sometimes people, write the chapter and we just go on to do the next chapter. And then other times people go back to go like, what's the best parts of this chapter? Like, I'm going to revisit, I'm going to highlight. A lot of times people don't go back to look at those chapters to highlight what's the part from here that we're going to learn from or grow from or share to others. And that's the powerful part, right? Mm-hmm. So you are taking all of that, those highlighted notes, those things you've learned through all your experiences, and you've built it into this really amazing framework that you're able to share. So I appreciate it because I've taken an immense amount out of this conversation.
Awesome.
It's just opened my eyes in many ways, and it's really cool to see how passionate you are and the way you light up as you are explaining and passing on, like, this can change your life, and this is how it's going to change your life.
Love it, man. Appreciate the opportunity today, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on here. For everyone listening, in the show notes, I will have a link to Jerrid's website, as well as his LinkedIn profile. I'll also throw a link for his book as well. So you want to check out his best-selling book, Life Undeferred. So those will all be in there. Jerrid, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Boom. Love it.
All right.